Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our latest coronavirus episode. We're Monday, April 6th, and let's talk vaccines today. We haven't really talked about vaccines so much yet because the story it's kind of hard. There's not much data floating around. Vaccines is much slower moving than traditional antivirals because all of the work in vaccines has to start from scratch. And it really starts from the very first sharing of the genetic code for coronavirus. Once you have the codes, then you can start to design your vaccines. What part of the virus do you want to be targeting? Once it's designed, then you've got to run your phase 1 trials, your phase 2 trials, etc., etc. You can't jump straight into large phase 3 repositioning an existing older drug, such as Gilead and Remdesivir, which had already kind of got through those many steps already. Also, because you're testing a vaccine in healthy people, you have to move somewhat slower. You have to be doubly sure about the risk-benefit profile. You also, because you're testing whether you're preventing something happening in the future, you'd need to recruit many more people into your studies in order to kind of definitively prove that your vaccine is effective. Contrasting against an antiviral where you know everyone has a disease, it's kind of a somewhat easier experiment. All this being said, it's probably not going to have the first commercial availability of a vaccine for somewhere between 12 and 18 months. It's going to stretch into next year, which may or may not be too late in terms of whether we can control the coronavirus using social distancing measures. What do we know about vaccines? If we look at the R&D database pharma projects, there are currently 53 different vaccine approaches in preclinical or clinical developments. Just 2 of these are in phase 1 trials, so the vast majority are still early on in their research stage. The 2 clinical stage vaccines are one from Moderna, which uses some mRNA technology, while there's a Chinese biotech, CanSino, that has a recombinant vaccine in phase 1 trials in China too. So let's talk a bit about Moderna, because I think this is the one where there's been the most disclosure about, certainly the most media coverage. Moderna has been the first company to reach various different milestones. The most important milestone so far being initiation of that phase 1 and then the dosing of the first healthy volunteer, which kind of captured global news headlines. So I want to caveat this by saying Moderna has been operating for 10 years so far, and it's yet to produce a commercial product. But it has its technology, which is a so-called plug-and-play vaccine technology, has enabled it to be very nimble. So first to get into phase 1 trials, it should be able to start running phase 2 trials that might test efficacy in parallel within a few months. Potential availability to healthcare workers as early as late summer or autumn this year, and then commercial availability, potential approval into next year. Being such a new company, Moderna doesn't really have manufacturing footprints unlike the big vaccine manufacturers. So a lot of the clinical development work is going to need to be done in tandem and parallel with scaling up of manufacturing facilities. I mean, assuming Moderna is adequately funded, which if the clinical trial data are positive, then that's not going to be a problem. The company does estimate that it should be able to produce millions of doses every month. So this is also a commercially viable approach too, even though it's not clinically validated. Beyond Moderna, as I say, there are many other big vaccine manufacturers getting involved in the coronavirus effort. Some of these include Sanofi, J&J, Merck, Pfizer, etc. Not to mention lots of academic research. The variety in the vaccine development approach is important because we don't know which is going to be effective. There are different technologies you can employ, and then simply designing the vaccine, what part of the coronavirus structure should we be trying to create immunity against? So there's no guarantee that any one vaccine is going to be effective, so it really does help to have multiple shots on goal at this stage. I have used the hare and the tortoise analogy and before, and it is especially apt with vaccines. Moderna is certainly our hare. It's got out the blocks very quickly because of its technology. It enables it to cut some of the corners that other manufacturers might be held back by. But its technology isn't proved, and it may yet not reach the finish line. The slower moving vaccine manufacturers have probably a greater likelihood of being able to develop an effective vaccine, but the time at which this is available to patients might be too late in terms of actually having a notable effect on the curve, really. That's all I wanted to talk about. What's next with vaccines? It's kind of somewhat difficult to know what to expect. I would think probably the most likely thing will be new vaccine approaches moving from into phase 1 clinical trials. Well, as I say, I don't think it's going to be until a few months that Moderna will be starting to ramp up and do phase 2 trials. So we're in somewhat of a lull. It's important to set the foundation because vaccines will ultimately be the best approach at flattening the curve. But as I say, the big caveat is, will they come too late for it to have a noticeable effect? Thanks a lot for listening, and I hope to catch you soon. Bye now.